This is the Parents Who Think debate show, bringing you episode 3 and the closeout of our Should Smacking Be Banned in England and Northern Ireland debate. If you found your way to Parents Who Think for the first time, welcome. And hello to all our regulars who'd probably say go listen to episodes 1 and 2 of this debate. If you do, you'll get the full experience. You'd meet the 3 PWT parents properly and hear about why they hold the opinions they do on this topic. Meantime, I'll sum up the nub of this debate in one sentence for you. Here goes. Prioritise children's rights over parental rights versus support parents rather than penalise them. I'm Danusha Malina-Derben. I'm in conversation with 3 parents. One with what she thinks is a predictable opinion that smacking should be banned, and the other 2 with progressive opinions about this debate topic. One wants smacking to have been banned yesterday. The other does not agree with banning unless parental support is put in place. Now, in the 2 previous episodes, they share more on why they believe smacking should be banned in England and Northern Ireland, or not. We heard how parent education or lack thereof means that a smacking ban might not necessarily bring change to the cultural normality of this way of disciplining kids. Or will it? My guests have all been challenged by the pressures of sleep deprivation, for instance. They faced stressful situations where smacking was something they did or almost did. Despite compassion for times when smacking might seem like the answer, my guests do not agree about legislation to outlaw banning in England and Northern Ireland. Roma and Joe want smacking banned. Get it done right away. Nicole is not anti-banning, but she is pro-parent support and education in order to alleviate the likelihood of smacking happening. There's a difference. Now, PWT debate parents want kids to be safe, and Nicole is also a voice for parents to be supported. They don't agree about the order in which a smacking ban should be brought in. That's it. Now, all 3 parents have spent considerable time and money on educating themselves, whether in therapy, parent education courses, and more. Not all parents have the resources to do this, which is something Nicole's argument shines a light on. Here's a quick recap from Roma, Nicole, and Joe from last episode. Then we'll move on to hear these guests get into the if this, then that segment, and onto the one habit they have because of their opinions. I close out this debate by sharing my opinion on whether I think smacking should be banned in England and Northern Ireland. Now, expect perfectly imperfect opinions from me, because here on Parents Who Think, we celebrate the fact that each of us has the potential to be flawed and obnoxious. Let's see whether you disagree with my opinions or chime with them. No matter what, Parents Who Think is a place for scrappy-edged humans with our contrasting and contradictory views on tough topics. And before I forget, our next debate is on should parents let their underage children drink alcohol? Let's get to that recap.
Almost it's less important what's actually happening de facto and more important that we are making a stand for children's well-being, that we are providing a gold standard expectation.
As an adult, if we're not getting that really important part of the sleep where our brain is getting a chance to repair, we then have no ability to regulate our emotions. And that's a biological thing. That's not somebody wanting to cause destruction or devastation with their child. That is somebody who literally has no ability because their brain is not getting that chance to repair.
It flashed over me just how much I could, for a flash of a second, understand how people could go to shake babies or squeeze them tighter than they should because I felt it. And I put her down on the bed and I left the house and I went into my garden and I screamed and shouted and said many, many, many swear words.
In episode 1, we heard that Nicole hit rock bottom through sleep deprivation and found help. This led to her taking part in a series of programs and training that transformed her relationship to herself and her parenting. Roma also sought expert inputs, and she works with parents herself. She brings her neurodiverse family experiences into the mix. By the way, Nicole also works with parents. Now, Jo, a proud solo mother by choice, is raising a neurodiverse daughter who is by necessity teaching Jo about the kind of world we need to create for all children, neurotypicals included. These 3 parents show how tough parenting is. They also share how hard it is to get support, and they agree on the need for more of this. But they disagree vehemently on whether smacking needs to be banned, even when we know parental support is absent. The next segment is key, because we can skip over it or not even consider it as something to consider. That's a funny sentence, isn't it? But the fact is we might forget it. In PWT, we call it if this then that, because in any strong belief we hold, we've a picture or idea of what the consequences are of allowing something to be or happen. In the context of this debate, if we ban smacking in England and Northern Ireland, what will the consequences be for children? What about for parents? What difference will this make within society? The this is banning smacking, and the that is the impact of this for children and for parents. The essence of this segment is about the consequences of actions, beliefs, or decisions. I ask my guests if this, then that, about a potential smacking ban in England and Northern Ireland. So if this, then that, if smacking is banned, what's going to happen?
We're just going to see more people hiding. We're going to see mental health getting worse. We're going to see people in more fear and feeling ashamed. Imagine that you've been told that the feelings that you've got, or if you have smacked your child, that you are now, in the eyes of the law, a criminal. How does that make you feel? You know, that is not going to put you in a good place mentally at all, because I've just done something that I have been told is a criminal act. I am now a criminal. Oh my goodness me, I can't tell anybody. I am failing my child because I have now done something that could actually leave me with charges. Well, what does that do to somebody's mental health? It takes them one way. And as soon as you start feeling that you're failing and you can't ask for help because you've done something wrong, something you and me talked about the other days, does that just put you on the path to, I don't even like saying it, but that worst case scenario of suicide? Because if you feel that you can't do the job that you are meant to do, which is to love, protect your child, and you can't do it without being flawed, it frightens me.
If we condone smacking, we're condoning raising a society of adults with impaired emotional literacy, poorer mental health outcomes, less capacity for deep intimacy in relationships, and, as we see from research, higher rates of antisocial behaviour and crime.
All my guests were smacked in childhood. Does this mean they themselves as adults found themselves with impaired emotional literacy, poor mental health, less capacity for intimacy and relationships? Did they express antisocial behaviour in society? Should I have asked them if they have criminal records on antisocial behaviour charges? I asked Roma what the consequences of what she described will be for children and for parents.
If we ban it, we have to offer an alternative to parents. We have to offer good information, tools, support.
On the one hand, Roma is a staunch ban-smacking voice. On the other, she wants tools and support for parents. It's both.
I absolutely see that is a possibility. That should be happening already. The tools are available. They're just not widespread and they're not accessible and it's not common knowledge. We're not teaching this stuff. Maybe it should be taught even in school.
Being a parent is challenging. The reality is sleep deprivation and life stresses like putting enough food on the table and keeping a roof over our families' heads means parents feel real strain. It's not made up. Roma says there are tools and support out there to teach alternative behaviours and strategies to parents, but they're not easy to get.
So how likely do you think it will be that the government will tandem ban smacking and provide information?
It's not looking wildly likely in this current climate, is it? I wouldn't hold out too high a hope. And yet, I don't know, we are a very progressive country in many ways. It's interesting because we've got this sort of culture of the stiff upper lip and the corporal punishment in schools. And I'm sure that many of the Tories in power currently have had this kind of upbringing.
Not so progressive to have already banned smacking or to make sure support for parents is accessible for all. In episode 2, all my guests talk about emotional regulation and how parents need to develop this. We talk about the bigger challenge this can be for neurodiverse parents. Will a smacking ban help?
Do you think, Nicole, that's going to progress our understandings of our emotional literacy for ourselves as parents?
No. I think what's going to happen is these parents that are struggling behind closed doors now, that are on Google looking for ways to get out of a situation that they're stuck in, are then going to actually say, I better not Google things because everybody can see what I'm searching for. Everybody's watching, yourself. As soon as you start talking about something, you look on your phone and the next thing you know, you've got an advert for the thing you've been talking about. We feel like we're being watched all the time. So actually, if you make this a criminal thing, if somebody's struggling, they'll stop looking for it. They'll stop looking for help. They'll stop speaking to people because they'll feel like they're being judged. They won't ask for the help from the doctor because they'll feel that their child is going to get taken away from them and get taken to social services because they should be coping better. They shouldn't be in this position where they feel enraged. They should be able to obviously have it all together because that is what the system is telling us. The system is telling us that we should have this together because our children are precious and our children are vulnerable. But actually, parents are vulnerable and we're just not getting the right message. We're not putting the support in the right place.
Nicole and Roma, despite disagreeing about whether smacking should be banned, agree about the need for parental support, but not about the timing for this. Does smacking get banned, then we hope support is put in place, or get the support rolled out, then ban smacking? Here's Jo on the consequences of the smacking ban. She's a yes to the ban.
I think there's always a risk of it leading to some family situations being worse. But, if we don't make it illegal, there's always going to be this grey line of what is and isn't acceptable. And I think without there being a line saying this isn't acceptable, we're never going to know.
Know what exactly? Where the line is? What the consequences are?
I think back to when my mum tells me stories of how she was physically punished in school settings.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure people go, well, how are we meant to, in a school setting now, before the law changed, how are we meant to instill the behaviour that we wanted or get the behaviour that we wanted and what would happen? But, it horrifies me today to think there could be physical punishment or smacking or a cane on my child at school.
I'm sure there will be people that will be saying, well, this is why our children are so badly behaved now.
Yes. Yeah. I bet they would, because again, it's this fear leading. But what surprised me during thinking about this, when I sat down and thought, what is my opinion on this? And how strong is my opinion on this? Comparing it to hitting, kicking, slapping an adult. So I said before to a friend, I wouldn't dream of smacking another adult without their consent, of course. That's a different thing. And I also wouldn't dream of kicking, slapping, hitting my pet cat. And yet, if you have a look at the recent case of the West Ham footballer, he had 180 hours of community service and was banned for 5 years from having another cat for kicking and slapping it on the head. And we find that horrifying. And people are outraged. And I don't know if you've heard that Haim Ginott quote. He was a famous child psychologist and psychotherapist in the US. And he had a quote, when a child hits a child, we call it aggression. When a child hits an adult, we call it hostility. When an adult hits an adult, we call it assault. And when an adult hits a child, we call it discipline.
It's a great quote, isn't it?
Joe Sayton 6 is, as adults, we can do better. Maya Angelou is credited with the saying, do the best you can until you know better. Then, when you know better, do better. We need to know better to put this in place. Nicole gets heated.
Support the people that are struggling, support the people that are lost and hidden and in isolation and lonely, that are scared to actually say, hi, I really am struggling and I could do with some help. Let's make it a mainstream thing that when you have a baby, we kind of say, this is what's potentially going to happen. And here's where you can get support for all these different eventualities. And we're not saying it's going to be easy, but if you feel like X, speak to this person before it gets to Y. And that's the problem. We're waiting till people are at Y, at breaking point. And then if we wait till that point and we make it so there's is a barrier that stops them asking for help, because they could become a criminal and they could potentially lose their child, or because they didn't actually know where to get help or what it even looked like, then no, we're just failing the parents in every sense of the word. And by failing those parents, we're failing the children.
Yes.
Fear is rife.
For Nicole, banning smacking without support drives parents underground so that they won't ask for help. When I asked her to say more about a rise in mental health issues, here's what she said.
I don't think we can predict it, because people live in fear. And when you're afraid, you don't talk about it. And this is the thing. We're just locking people behind closed doors and saying, no, don't come out and tell us that you're struggling. Don't do it. We don't want to know. You know, there's also the risk that actually, if the person doesn't get any help, can that actually turn into abuse? Because does that behavior then continue behind closed doors? Does it mean that actually their child becomes quite violent to the parent, maybe? Because maybe the parent doesn't know how to handle those really tough situations and feels like, no, I can't smack my child. Okay, they're battering me, but I can't do anything back. Do we end up in the other way around, that actually the child becomes the abuser? That's a real long shot. Do you know what I mean? But we can't predict what could happen.
I asked Jo what she feels if smacking isn't banned.
If we don't ban smacking, then I really feel that our children are more risk of being hurt or traumatized. And we also perpetuate the view that it's okay to hurt children. And perhaps more importantly, that it's okay to use physical threat as a response to a situation.
Has she forgotten parents?
I think we become role models for how to regulate our emotions. I think we can have a positive impact on all our relationships and ourselves when we learn better how to regulate our emotions and understand our own triggers in situations.
How, though, Jo? How is that going to happen? From whenever it is brought in, from one night to the next day, how is that same parent going to be a different parent in the morning as they wake up?
Well, they're not. And I think it's, again, how ironic is this? The threat of unlawful activity that may cause people to stop and think. If it can cause somebody to stop and think for a moment, then that's a moment that we have to grab their attention and get them to think twice.
Kind of,
threatening a punishment to
yeah, it's a threat.
to stop people committing a punishment. Yes.
Final words in the If This Then That segment go to Roma.
So what we're trying to do is actually eliminate being taken by surprise, being hijacked effectively by the limbic system of your brain, so that, you're actually more in control of yourself more of the time. And that's what children experience as having a safe pair of hands in charge. That's what our children are needing most of all, actually, is an adult who is most of the time well regulated and thinking well and making good decisions. And this is something that we can work towards.
Well, let's sum up, shall we? Now, Roma, Joe and Nicole all argue that parental support is needed. They all care about the well-being and safeguarding of children. No guest is pro-smacking. That's a given. But Nicole is a loud voice for systemic parental support from pregnancy right through childhood, and once this is present, to ban smacking. Joe and Roma want a smacking ban to deter parents from using any physical punishments. They're a vote for banning now. They appreciate there are risks that physical punishment isn't eradicated, but improvements brought about by legislation banning smacking kids make it worth it. And that brings us to the next segment. What's the one habit guests have because of their opinion on this topic? What habits come from my guests' beliefs? Here's me asking Joe.
So what's the one habit, Joe, that you have because of your opinion on this topic?
Okay, I'll be honest here. I could not find one particular habit.
Right.
I felt I had a few, habits in response to my opinions. So one is around language. I would avoid at all costs using the term punishment and punitive consequences. And I think I positively try and use the term natural consequences in my language with my daughter and with institutions that she is touching, school and even in, with my mum in my still helps me parent my daughter as well, and looks after occasionally. So I use the term about natural consequences, and I use that in my language with friends as well.
In episode 1, Joe took us inside her experiences of being physically punished as a child by her mother. She finds herself now trying to educate her mum about natural consequences rather than resorting to smacking. Here's what she means.
So often my mum is a fan of a massive sweeping consequence. So I won't have you to come stay again, she'll say to my daughter, or I'll never give you sweets again. And I'm like, stop making these ridiculous, silly punishments or consequences up when you're not going to go through with them. And that's not a natural consequence. You've eaten too many sweets. So you're going to not have any more sweets for, the rest of the day or something like that, rather than sweeping wild ones that she won't keep to.
How is it for you to have your daughter cared for by your mum, given that she used to have such very different, behaviour, and also, as you've just said, is continuing to kind of challenge your ways, let's just say?
I think sometimes it's difficult, especially through a lack of understanding of neurodiversity and a fear, I think, of being labelled as something that she feels society wouldn't look fondly on. So I think sometimes it has been challenging, but I do call it out. I say, don't make threats you're not going to keep. And I think as a grandparent, she's less frustrated or angered by my granddaughter than she was by her own children, which I believe a lot of grandparents say they can hand them back.
I asked Nicole what her one habit is. Here's what she told me.
To never judge. Nobody knows what is going on behind closed doors. So I will never judge anybody for anything that they've ever been through or ever done, because do you know what? There's always something behind it. And as soon as we start judging people, we are basically telling them that they are doing something wrong, and it will close them off. If we are accepting that we all make mistakes, we are all human, and actually by opening up, we are allowing ourselves to grow as a person, we're allowing our education to develop, and we want to be better, that can only be a good thing. But we should never, ever judge somebody for their opinions, for the mistakes that they make, because it's tough. It's really hard.
This tension between the understandable desire to avoid being judgmental of others' behaviour or character and the moral necessity of making negative judgments in certain cases, such as when physical punishment of children is involved. We're discussing vulnerable children who need advocacy in situations where power dynamics favour adults. Protecting children's rights to avoid harm from adults requires judgment. This will be reflected in laws designed to safeguard their best interests, like a smacking ban. Roma's one habit supports parents.
Well, one of the amazing tools that I came across when I trained with Hand in Hand Parenting, which is a US organization that now has instructors worldwide, is a tool that they call listening partnerships. And that's something I adopted when my family was in a really stressed moment. I actually was doing listening partnerships every single day. And what that is an exchange between two parents where you set aside, could be half an hour, and you swap time listening to one another. So one will listen for 15 minutes and then you'll switch over and the other will listen back. So it's an exchange. It's free. Anyone can access it. And I'd love to see this being widespread, because this is the kind of intervention that makes an incredible amount of difference, more than you can even imagine.
This sounds like a good resource. I asked Roma to explain how it works.
It's a safe container of confidentiality, and there are various rules, like you don't give any advice or feedback, and it's your job just to beam your approval and permission and acceptance of the other person, regardless of what they say. And that is such a useful intervention to have in your life, because what it gives you are these little pockets of connection that punctuate your week, connection with another adult, which is one of the things that we really need when we're parenting, particularly if you're a single parent. But actually, most parents feel quite isolated. So it gives you a little top up of connection. You're having a very meaningful conversation with another person. You cut through all the small talk and you share generally very touching content. It's real, but also what it gives you is a place to pour out your feelings. It's a way of co-regulating with another adult.
One of the powerful themes in this debate has been about emotional dysregulation in parents. Pent-up emotional energy drives behaviour, like smacking.
So if we can offer ourselves this level of support, it's preventative of dysregulation. It actually conditions our nervous system over the longer term, so that we become that more steady, regulated, safe pair of hands that we've been talking about.
We all agree children need caregivers with what we call safe pairs of hands. I was interested in whether Roma still has listening partnerships.
Yeah, I do, actually, maybe 3 times a week at the moment. I've got listening partners all over the world who I've built. The relationships that we've created are just one of a kind. We know things about each other that maybe nobody else really knows. And yeah, there's a lot of depth and safety, and it's always uplifting to hear their voices. Mm-hmm. And generally speaking, what's really useful about a listening partnership is that it allows you to absolutely go wild with ideation. You can talk about how much you want to throttle your child. You can talk about how you want to abandon them or send them to boarding school. And that is actually a form of release. And the emphasis is really on trusting the parent, trusting that they are doing what they need to do to take care of themselves, so that actually when they go back to their children, they're calmer and they can manage.
Let's return to Jo as she shares another of her habits.
One is around verbalizing when I'm angry, demonstrating when, say, I'm angry right now, so using the language. And I use that with my daughter. So whenever she can see me, I was like, I'm not. And she sometimes, because again, she feels emotions differently. So when I'm frustrated, she'll say, Mummy, you're so angry at me. And I'm like, no, this isn't me angry. I'm just disappointed, or I'm frustrated. And I was like, my tone of my voice and my volume is very different. Sometimes I'll go, when I'm angry, I shout. Mm-hmm. I'm not shouting. I'm very calm, but I'm just very frustrated or very disappointed. Mm-hmm. And I need to then carry that through, as well as identifying what that emotion is. I will role model to calm myself down. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, can you? So she will actively come up and help me. She will say, do your breathing exercises, Mummy. Mm-hmm. Or she'll put her hand on my heart, which I do with her, and say, okay, let's breathe. Mm. Let's fill up your love tank. So when you place our hands on each other's heart and call it, filling up our love tanks. Use sensory toys from her calm box. Talk to a friend. Walk away, or sometimes cry. I will talk about them, and I'll talk about them as measures to help me feel less angry or upset or frustrated.
So she literally sees you doing this?
Yes.
And actually supports you?
Yes. And she will come up to it and go, Mummy, let's put Taylor Swift on, Shake It Off, so we can dance to it.
So you're embedding those skills.
Yes, exactly. And demonstrating them for her. So yes, mm-hmm. Exactly. So she knows when I'm using them, and she can label what I'm feeling and what I'm doing to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. As opposed to keeping this secret that you're trying to cope with her, let's say, or life. So you actually express it. Because a lot of parents that I've spoken to feel that it's important to keep all this away from their children, to protect their children from knowing that they're actually livid, for instance, or they're desperate, and it's not necessarily about the child, for instance, but their ability to be regulated with the child is affected by those other external factors.
And I try and let her know that it shouldn't be a dirty secret. The more we keep it a dirty secret, the worse it gets. I'm angry and I can't show my child, or explain to my child that I was angry or that I am angry. Because I found even labeling it at the time helps me so much. And then talking about it afterwards, and I'm like, I was so angry and I had to do something to calm myself down. And it's okay to be angry, as well as it's okay to be upset. If I've cried in front of my daughter, I will say, it's okay to cry. It's okay to release those emotions.
Finding ways to discharge our pent-up emotions appropriately takes practice. Roma and Jo learned how to do this in their ways.
When we're going through our own issues, we sometimes just don't know how to deal with it ourselves. It doesn't matter. We can have the best education in the world. Sometimes when it's your own child, you sometimes need that outside opinion. And yeah, I'm really harsh on myself, and I get quite cross with myself if I can't be the calm parent I want to be, because I'm not realistically, I'm not a calm person, and I do shout. And yeah, I don't think I'll ever be the person that doesn't shout. I don't think that's inbuilt in me. It's part of my personality. Not that I shout, but that flip. And I do think a lot of it comes from what happens right at the beginning. We might not realize it, but actually what happens at that beginning when we first become a parent can actually shape our entire parenthood, because what habits we get into are very hard to break. And if you end up having some kind of trauma or long-term sleep deprivation and things aren't quite triggering the way that they would have done maybe if you hadn't been through something, that can then become a bit of a trigger that sort of sticks with you.
Yeah.
And it doesn't disappear, just doesn't disappear unless you do a lot of work, and I haven't got time to do that. So I'll just apologize and role model.
Talking and expressing in listening partnerships, re-educating parents about natural consequences, not sweeping statements as punishments, trying hard to not judge people's actions and behaviour, including our own, and verbalising and normalising emotions, then finding ways to co-regulate, are all habits my guests have because of their opinions on whether smacking should be banned in England and Northern Ireland. These are their ways to make being the best parent they can be possible. In episode 1, I dish the dirt on my relationship with being smacked as a child and of my own smacking in the past with my children. I set this within different cultural parenting norms at historical points. Even 10 years ago, what was mainstream back then might be unacceptable now. I said I'd share with you my opinion on whether smacking should be banned in England and Northern Ireland in the Last Words segment. Here we are. I'll cut to the chase. I'm anti-smacking, which is an important point to reiterate. Children need safe relationships and homes to grow up in. Reality is that many of us are still affected by our own upbringing, whether through dysfunctional patterns of relating or physical punishments, used to get us to behave ourselves. We bring the impacts of these patterns into our parenting, and it's these that are activated when we face hard child-rearing times. I'm a yes to banning smacking in England and Northern Ireland. I believe that smacking and all types of physical punishments need to be outlawed. My caveat is this. I query the wisdom of bringing in this legislation before putting in place systemic parental support. Instead, wouldn't it model a fairer country if we had online parent support and training accessible to all? This would be information from pregnancy through to kids growing up and leaving home. In other words, it would need to span the breadth of raising children, not just attend to the early days. Parents need guidance and healing. They need safe space within themselves to build safe space for their children. Guidance and healing could be available in an online database where each parent would take part in mandatory training and access resources and support. A smacking ban without this support and training will create a culture of heightened fear. I'm just not convinced that parents will change their behaviour. I see bridge building as the next step in eradicating physical punishments. Bridge building or scaffolding support needs to happen before we build the wall that makes smacking illegal. Children's rights to a violence-free childhood needs protecting and reinforcing. But we also need to be realistic about our starting point on this with parents as they are today, not how we wish they would be. It's not parents or children's welfare. I believe we can serve them both. Let's close this should smacking be banned in England and Northern Ireland debate with some final words from my wonderful guests, Jo, Nicole and Roma, and huge thanks to them for sharing their opinions with us.
I wish I had a magic wand that could provide the opportunities that I have proactively given myself and proactively taken myself, but not everyone has access to them. Some I've had to fight for, but to help educate myself.
Exactly.
And have that ability to self-reflect. Not everyone has that natural ability to stop back
We can't be perfect. If we are perfect, then our children are trying to aspire to be us because they always want to be the parents. And if we seem to be perfect all the time, then that's something that's unachievable. But if we as a parent are in a situation to say, do you know what, I'm holding my hands up, I've made a mistake, I shouldn't have done X, Y, or Z, but actually I'm going to apologize for this mistake and I'm actually going to do this to make it right, then our children see that actually it's okay to not be perfect all the time. It's okay to make mistakes, and actually you can make up for those mistakes. That's much more achievable.
I mean, broadly speaking, parental well-being is very much tied in with children's well-being. It's not a separate thing, because when you're violent towards a child, it feels inherently wrong. It grates on you and it erodes your sense of self as a parent. You maybe can't hold your head as high as if you knew you were in full integrity with your children. It damages the relationship, and that's just as important to parents as it is to children. It's a two-way street. So I think we can have ambitions for parents to have more than just needing to resort to their sort of base instincts in moments of stress. I think we can uphold a vision of parents in their excellence. I mean that as a sort of really standing for parents' greatness.
Thanks everyone for listening to this episode of Parents Who Think. It's real easy to become a member of the Parents Who Think membership community over at the Parents Who Think Substack. Put the words Parents Who Think Substack into your search engine and voila, get involved. We also have our YouTube channel called Parents Who Think Too. Thanks for being such a great supporter of the show, and remember to tune in for the next PWT debate on should parents let their underage children drink alcohol. Till then, take care everyone.